I spent 14 months in a Chilean prison. I had a little miscommunication issue. I was at a bakery and I was actually trying to get a little cake. And I thought they spoke Portuguese in Chile. And I wanted something kind of like a petit four. Kind of had a little miscommunication. The dude's wife got into a fight with me. I like to say it like that. I didn't get a fight with him. He got into a fight with me. I wound up shivving him between the bottom rib and the rib just above it. I pierced just the edge of his lung. He's okay now. It healed. But I wound up spending 14 months in a Chilean prison. And I learned a whole lot about proper preparation of sea bass. And when I came back to the States, I was employed briefly at a Chilean restaurant. And the problem was nobody likes Chilean food except Chilean people. So that didn't last very long. So I wound up actually working for a talent agent who he mostly represented vaudeville type acts. And being that this was in the 90s and no one gave a flying fuck about vaudeville, we weren't making so much money, so that didn't last very long. I did briefly work for the FDA. I would go to primarily chicken farms, sometimes other places where they have poultry, and I would examine conditions there. I would check eggs, just kind of you take a random sampling of the eggs, you hold it up in front of the light and see if there's anything that's in there that's not supposed to be, like a thumb or a syringe or something like that in the egg. You don't find too much stuff that way. I didn't like that job because it involved too much travel, and my feet can't take all that walking. So I quit that job. I was briefly employed by a dominatrix, mostly just answering the phones and taking messages, setting up appointments, that kind of thing. She was a little bit gruff, I would say. It was not the best working environment, so I quit that. And then I was actually working as a street performer. I didn't play music, but I was actually a juggler. And I kind of, I started doing the knives and stuff, and then someone lost an ear. There was a lawsuit. I basically had to leave the country for 7 years because there's a statute of limitations. So for 7 years, I was actually living in Mexico. And considering, the skills I developed as working with Chilean sea bass, I thought, I'm a shoe-in for the Mexican food industry in Mexico. That didn't work out too well. Basically, I was working as a busboy for 6 months, and then I got fired. I got fired mainly because I was stealing, though, so I can't totally blame them. It's more of a, like a 90% blame them. It's a 90-10 kind of situation because I was stealing and sleeping with the boss's wife, and that's how I got herpes. But when I was going to the La Hospitalia, La Hospitalia for treatments, I actually wound up getting a job as an orderly, and that was going well until they found out that I was stealing and sleeping with the boss's wife. And I kind of learned after the second time. I was like, wait a minute, maybe that's not how employment should work. So then I actually wound up working as a. They don't really have this same kind of job in America. Basically, if you have a bowling alley in the U.S., what happens is the ball knocks down all the pins, and then the pins are reset by a machine. It works differently in Mexico. Basically, I would manage five lanes at a time, so I'm running back and forth resetting pins for 8 hours a day. I was making the equivalent of $17 per day, and I was living in a 250 square foot home with 7 people, all of which I was stealing from, and that's basically how I made it through. Because you learn things about not stealing from work. You start stealing from your roommates or the Espinosa family that I was living with at the time, and that went on for a little while. And then I finished out my time out of the United States, kind of being that statute. I was in Canada, which is kind of a weird story behind that. I won't get into all the details, but let's just say I was eating sardines for basically 2 weeks straight, and by the time I got to Canada, I was so shriveled up from all the salt that I kind of looked like an 80, 90-year-old, like a septuagenarian and beyond. So in Canada, I wound up working at a Mexican restaurant in Canada. There's some logic for you, back in the Mexican food industry. This time I was a waiter, and I accidentally poured some fajitas on a baby. The baby died, the whole big mess. But luckily, that was when the statute of limitations ran out on all the stuff that happened in the U.S. So I came back to the U.S., and I started, at the time, I was a tester at a dog food facility. Basically, I was sampling dog food, make sure the quality was good. I developed a rash from something that was in the dog food there, and basically I just had to keep the job because, you know what, that is the one place where they weren't trying to fire me or sue me. But it basically covered my entire body, and it was, it was hard to see in certain spots because, as I said, the herpes. But my skin, after about 6 months, my skin peeled off in like one huge layer. It was kind of like when you see a snake skin, like after it sheds its skin, it's all that one big piece. It was kind of like that. So I kind of had like this very brittle life cast of my entire body. And then I won $20,000 in the lottery. So I didn't work for 2 years because $20,000, that's like 2 years worth of pay from what I'm used to. And that brings us up to 2007, where I was briefly employed as, you ever see a parade, where they have the elephants, they have to have someone going behind them scooping up the elephant feces. But that's not that regular of a job, really, because the parades only last about 6 hours, and usually there's not another one for a couple of months. So I basically did that for one day, and then I attempted to assassinate a dictator in the Philippines. But, there's all this news coverage. I don't want to get into that because there's still some legal pending stuff, and, it's all, there's a gag order on that. So I left the Philippines, and somehow, I don't know, I got on the wrong boat, wrong plane, wrong bus. I wound up in Italy. And I was actually briefly married to a woman by the name of Esmeralda something or other. I guess it was my last name at the time. We were married. And I didn't speak Italian, and she didn't speak English. We both spoke Spanish poorly. So it was kind of an awkward thing. She would yell at me in Spanish to come eat pasta, and then I would yell at her for being a whore. And I actually used that same word that I used for cake. But basically, my point is, Chile has a rich and very deep kind of historical roots. And it's well worth studying. I'd say go to the library, but you don't have to go to the library because everybody has the internet now. So go home, look it up on the internet if you're at home. You got a BlackBerry, you can look that shit up. iPhone, just say, hey, go to Chile.